Right now, somewhere in your home, you are doing something you would never do in front of a stranger. Maybe you just closed the bathroom door. Maybe you moved to another room to make a phone call. Maybe you put on headphones so nobody could hear what you were listening to. You did it without thinking. You did it the way you breathe, automatically, without choosing, without wondering why. And here is the question nobody has ever thought to ask you. Where did that instinct come from? Most people, if you press them, would say privacy is a modern invention, a luxury, something that came with walls, with locks, with the kind of architecture you need money to build. The Romans had private bathrooms, you might say. The Victorians invented the concept of personal space. Privacy is what happens when civilization gets comfortable enough to stop cramming people together for warmth and survival. That's the story. That's what feels true. But here's what actually happened. Privacy, real deep, psychologically urgent privacy, is not a product of civilization. It is older than cities. It is older than pottery. It may be older than language itself. And the evidence for that is sitting in caves, in grave sites, in the sleeping arrangements of people who lived 40,000 years ago. And it points to something so fundamental about you that once you understand it, you will never look at a closed door the same way again. Let's go back, way back. In 2004, Francesco De Rico at the University of Bordeaux and his colleagues published a landmark analysis of ochre-covered shell beads found at Blombos Cave in South Africa. The beads were 75,000 years old. 75,000? That predates any European human settlement by tens of thousands of years. And what were these beads? They were personal ornaments, body decorations, things worn close to skin that said, "This is who I am. This is not you. This is me." Think about that. 75,000 years ago, before any written language, before any city, before any concept of law or property or individual rights, a human being wakes up in the morning and chooses to put something on their body that marks them as a distinct individual. That is not survival behavior. You don't need a shell bead to eat or hunt or stay warm. That bead is the first artifact of something we might recognize today as a private self, an interior life that wanted to express itself, that wanted to be seen on its own terms. But the bead is just the beginning. Because here's what nobody tells you about how ancient humans actually lived day to day. And this is where it gets genuinely strange. We have been taught in 1,000 documentaries and museum dioramas to picture prehistoric humans as communal creatures packed tightly together, no privacy, no personal space, everybody doing everything together around the fire. And that is partially true. But it is also, in the most important ways, completely wrong. In 2018, Niobe Thompson, a Canadian anthropologist and filmmaker who spent years embedded with indigenous Siberian communities whose way of life mirrors Upper Paleolithic conditions, published observations showing that even in the most densely communal hunter-gatherer groups, individuals carve out what he called privacy territories. Specific times of day, specific physical spots, specific behaviors that are understood by everyone around them to be off-limits. If a man walks to the edge of the camp and sits with his back to the group, no one follows him. No one asks where he's going. That moment is recognized collectively as his, not because anyone made a rule, because the group intuitively understands that a person who is never alone becomes dangerous, erratic, unreliable. The group protects individual privacy because the group needs individuals to function. Let that sit for a second. Now here is where the evidence gets even more surprising. In 2020, a research team led by evolutionary anthropologist David Sampson at the University of Toronto published a study in the journal Current Biology examining sleep patterns across multiple hunter-gatherer populations, including the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the last true hunter-gatherer cultures on Earth, whose lifestyle has remained largely unchanged for tens of thousands of years. What Sampson and his team found shattered one of the most persistent myths about ancient communal living. The Hadza do not sleep in synchronized group clusters. Their sleep is staggered. At any given moment during the night, multiple individuals are awake while others sleep, creating what Sampson called temporal privacy windows. Pockets of time when a person is functionally alone, even inside the group. On average, across a full night, there were only 18 minutes when every single individual in a camp was asleep simultaneously. 18 minutes out of 8 hours. What does that mean? It means ancient humans were not living in a constant communal blur. They were living in a carefully, almost organically structured web of overlap and separation. Somebody is always awake. Somebody is always watching. But you also get your 40 minutes alone with the fire before dawn. And that alone time is not incidental. It is structured into the biology of the group. Your body still runs this rhythm. If you have ever woken up at 3 a.m. for no clear reason, felt mysteriously alert for an hour, and then drifted back to sleep, you have not experienced insomnia. You have experienced your Stone Age brain doing its ancient night watch rotation. That wakefulness is not a malfunction. It is a feature. It is 40,000 years old, and it is yours. But let's talk about something even more intimate than sleep. Let's talk about grief. In 2021, Juan Zillaume at the University of Barcelona and a team of researchers published a detailed analysis of a Neanderthal burial site at Shanidar Cave in Iraqi Kurdistan, a site first excavated in the 1950s, but whose significance has only recently become fully clear. What they found at Shanidar Z, as the burial is called, was a Neanderthal individual who had been deliberately, carefully placed in the ground with their body curled into a fetal position, their head resting on what appears to have been a stone pillow. The burial dates to approximately 70,000 years ago. The deliberateness of it, the care of it, was unmistakable. Now think about what a deliberate burial requires. It requires someone to believe that the dead person mattered as an individual, not just as a member of the group, not just as a hunter or a mother or a toolmaker, as a specific, irreplaceable person whose body deserved to be treated with tenderness. That is a private grief. That is one person or a small group of people holding something inside that the outside world cannot fully touch. That is interiority. That is a self that exists beyond function. Neanderthals, 70,000 years ago, grieving privately, honoring the individual. Here's what that means for you. Every time you have stood at a graveside and felt that strange gap between what you feel and what you are able to say, that wordless interior thing that belongs only to you, you are feeling something that predates your species' dominance of this planet by tens of thousands of years. That feeling is not civilized. That feeling is ancient, and it is not a weakness. It is the proof that you have always had an inner world that no one else could fully enter. Let's keep going, because the evidence gets even deeper and stranger and more personal. In 2019, April Nowell at the University of Victoria published research examining Upper Paleolithic cave art, specifically the placement of art within caves like Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, sites dating back roughly 17,000 to 20,000 years. What Nowell's spatial analysis revealed was startling. The most elaborate art, the bison, the horses, the handprints, the geometric symbols, is frequently located in the most inaccessible parts of the caves, not near the entrance where everyone gathers, not near the fire hearths, deep inside, around corners, behind narrow passages that a person has to squeeze through alone, in the dark, with a single small lamp made of animal fat. Someone crawled alone through the dark to paint a horse no one else might ever see. Why? The most common interpretation for decades was ritual, that these were sacred spaces used for group ceremonies. And that may be true partly, but Nowell and others have argued for something more personal, that these remote spaces were also places of individual withdrawal, spaces where a person could go to be genuinely alone with something, a vision, an idea, a fear, a prayer, in a world where true solitude was almost impossible to find above ground. They built their privacy underground, in the dark, by firelight, alone. You probably think the closest thing you have to that is closing your bedroom door, or putting on noise-canceling headphones, or locking the bathroom. But consider this, the human need for a private mental space, a place inside or around you where the group cannot follow, has never disappeared. It has only changed its address. The cave is now a podcast. The narrow passage is now a locked phone screen. The animal fat lamp is now the blue light of a screen in the dark at midnight. You are still crawling into the cave. You are still looking for the place where you can be just yourself. That need is not weakness. That is not antisocial behavior. It is a 20,000-year-old survival mechanism, and here's the science that proves it. In 2016, Matthew Lieberman at UCLA, one of the world's leading social neuroscientists and the author of Social, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect, published research showing that the brain's default mode network, the system that activates when you are not focused on any external task, is essentially a privacy engine. When you stare out a window, when you daydream, when your mind wanders in the shower, your brain is not idle. It is running a highly active simulation of your social world, processing relationships, rehearsing future conversations, consolidating your sense of who you are in relation to others. The brain demands this offline time. Without it, social cognition degrades, empathy drops, decision-making deteriorates. You need to be alone inside your head in order to function in the group. Here is the stunning thing. This neural architecture and the default mode network is not unique to modern humans. Studies on chimpanzees and other great apes show similar patterns of rest state brain activity, which means the deep evolutionary pressure for private mental processing predates Homo sapiens by millions of years. Your need for alone time is not modern. It is not cultural. It is written into your brain at a level that is older than your species. Now let's talk about something that might make you uncomfortable. Because the history of privacy is not only a history of individuals protecting themselves, it is also a history of what happens when that privacy is taken away. In 2017, John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago, widely regarded as the father of social neuroscience, published the culmination of decades of research in his landmark book, Loneliness, Human Nature, and the Need for Social Connection. And what Cacioppo found, across study after study, was a paradox that should shake you. Loneliness, the painful experience of feeling unseen, disconnected, exposed, is physiologically identical to the stress response of a person who feels they have no privacy, no retreat, no space that belongs to them. Think about that. Too little connection feels the same in your body as too little privacy. Both activate the threat response. Both raise cortisol. Both disrupt sleep. Both accelerate aging at the cellular level. Because in the ancient environment, being cut off from the group and being watched by the group with no escape were equally dangerous. One meant you might be eaten by a predator. The other meant you might be consumed by the group itself. The modern world has managed, with astonishing efficiency, to give us both problems simultaneously. We are more surveilled than any humans in history. Your phone knows where you slept, what you searched, who you called, what you bought, what time you turned off your light. And we are simultaneously more lonely than any humans in recorded history, with a 2023 report from the U.S. Surgeon General declaring loneliness a public health epidemic affecting more than half of American adults. More than half. In a country where the average person has 300 Facebook friends and a phone that never leaves their hand. Ancient humans, living in groups of 25 to 150, with no walls, no locks, no legal concept of personal space, somehow managed to preserve both the individual's need for retreat and the group's need for connection. They did it through unspoken rules, through the turn back that nobody followed, through the night watch rotation that gave everyone their hour alone, through the underground cave that was always there for the one who needed to disappear for a while. We have somehow, with all of our architecture and technology and law, made both sides of that equation worse. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The crisis of privacy in the 21st century, the surveillance capitalism, the data harvesting, the always-on culture, is not just a political or legal problem. It is a biological emergency. Because the human animal was not built to be watched all the time. The human animal requires, at a deep evolutionary level, pockets of genuine invisibility, moments of being truly unobserved. And when those moments disappear, something ancient and essential in us starts to scream. You feel it. You probably don't have a name for it, but you feel it in the exhaustion of always being reachable, in the anxiety of seeing the little read notification under your message, in the low-grade dread of knowing your location is being tracked, your purchases analyzed, your emotions predicted by an algorithm that has read 10 billion human conversations. That dread is real, and it is old, older than you can imagine. Let's go back to the caves one more time, because there is one more piece of evidence, and it is the one that will stay with you. In 2009, Ian Davidson at the University of New England in Australia published a comprehensive review of all known evidence for symbolic behavior in early Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, tracing the capacity for what he called self-representation, the ability to hold an image of yourself in your mind, separate from the immediate demands of survival. This capacity, Davidson argued, is the true beginning of private life, because you cannot have a private life unless you have a self to be private about. You cannot protect an interior unless you have an interior. And the evidence suggests that self-representation, the neural capacity to say, in some form, I exist, I am distinct, I have an inside that is mine, emerges at least 100,000 years ago, possibly much earlier, which means that for 100,000 years, human beings have been carrying around an inner life that no one else can fully access, a private room inside the skull. And for 100,000 years, they have been both fiercely protective of that room and desperately lonely within it, needing at every moment to balance the inward and the outward, the hidden and the shared, the self and the group. That balance is not something civilization invented. It is something civilization inherited, and then, somewhere in the last 30 years, began to destroy. Now come back to the present. Come back to your home, your room, wherever you are right now. That closed door you closed without thinking. That headphone you put on. That room you walked to when you needed to make a phone call. You did not learn that behavior. You did not read it in a book or absorb it from your culture, though culture certainly shaped its form. That behavior comes from somewhere much older. It comes from a 75,000-year-old shell bead on a person's wrist that said, I am a self. It comes from a Neanderthal 70,000 years ago who held their grief privately inside a ceremony that no words could fully reach. It comes from a painter 20,000 years ago squeezing through a dark passage alone to put a horse on a cave wall that almost no one would ever see. You are not craving privacy because you are antisocial. You are not craving it because you have something to hide. You are craving it because you are human. Because every human who has ever lived has needed, at some point in every day, to be the one thing that cannot be fully known. To stand at the edge of the camp with your back to the group and know, without anyone having to say it, that this moment belongs to you. That moment has always belonged to you. The shell bead proves it. The cave proves it. The careful curl of a Neanderthal body in the dark earth of a cave in Iraq proves it. Your discomfort at being watched proves it. Your relief when you finally close the door proves it. Private life is not a luxury that civilization gave you. It is the oldest thing you own. And right now, in a world that is working very hard to take it from you, knowing that, really knowing it in your bones, might be the most important thing you can understand about what it means to be human. If this kind of deep dive into the human story is what you're looking for, subscribe and come back. Every episode, we go further back, dig deeper, and try to find the ancient thing hiding inside the modern moment. It's always there. We just have to know where to look.